We are on the brink of a new character release and express event in Lost Ark, so there will be many questions still in the air about what class one should play. Will I like it? Is it strong in the current meta? Well, I play 14 of the 26 classes currently in the game, and I will go over what I believe to be the easiest and biggest hitters in my roster. I have nearly 7k hours in the game, but don't get that twisted, I'm not particularly a high skill player, so finding easy to play big hitters is my go-to. This list is in no particular order, but only contains those that I deem noteworthy to new and returning players looking to hop in with something that wouldn't be that hard to pilot and allow you to bring impact to the fight. Hopefully these small reviews can give you some clarity before you choose. Mayhem was my main since launch. This is why I know that it has a large portion of the player base memeing on those who play it. Mayhem may be one of the easiest or is the easiest class available in the game. The lower health visual is just that, a visual. It is super tanky, fast due to its Mayhem stance, and has the ability to be always hitting. The class utilizes Nightmare, so only really requires an ult at the start. The rotation since a recent patch is actually even more relaxed. We have a crit buff based around two moves, Red Dust and Mountain Crash. Typically, it's the same 5 skills following the Red Dust into the same 1 to 2 after Mountain Crash. So, if you like set rotations, it is the most set you can get, but if you hate that, then this isn't for you. Previously, if you missed your Red Dust, you would also lose its 6% damage buff, but a recent balance patch has remedied that. Mayhem outputs decent to alright damage, but because it has the ability to keep attacking and has great movement, you can make up for this. Also, it provides great stagger and destruction utility for the party. Additionally, I've been playing Berserker's technique on one of my low-paying Zerks and it feels amazing. A recent revamp allows you to get into stance almost immediately, and then allows you to output insane amount of spec damage with a somewhat Mayhem mobility state. I know most will see the Salvation build and want the higher ceiling, but the Halu build with Sub Swift has great cooldowns, mobility, and just feels so fluid. All in, Zerk is one of my favorite classes to play, but of course, I am biased to the main I've played since launch. But it is super cheap, decent damage, quick, and if you want an additional fun, try the Zerk tech and just feel how great it is to play. Additionally, it's a great class to prog with. Sharpshooter is one of those classes that kind of is feeling power crept, more specifically Loyal Companion. Death Strike still hits hard, but I've kept mine Loyal Companion for how relaxed it is. Don't get me wrong, it still does great damage, especially on somewhat current content. For example, I have a 1580 Sharpshooter with not full con gear and not honed a con weapon, but I can keep up with others who don't gap the content with their own gear or aren't meta monsters. But on Guardians and over level content like Brel, I am just perma fighter unless the party I'm with is new. Note, I think Death Strike is still big damage, but in my initial 4-class recommendation video, I picked Loyal Companion because of its chill playstyle, and that's the value I see on it. Bird always hitting Z off cooldown and dropping snipe into the other damage moves in rotation is very relaxing still. Just note this variant of the class won't really pop off on over level content like other classes will currently. It is a mix of crit spec, so you can build fairly cheap, and Death Strike can also be built similarly cheap, with a big focus on 2 to 3 damage gems that will impact a majority of your damage. It is a fun time if you want a relaxed class. Wardancer was the 3rd class I ever made. I heard that Wardancer was broken in Korea's version, and I thought, damn, let me see this, not realizing the pain I would endure. It is the Swiss Army knife of Lost Ark. It can be remade to work after every nerf, and has relatively easy secondary build, first intention. Recently, this class got a giant rework that makes the playstyle more fluid and feel more powerful. The Halu 4 Spender has Azure Blue Dragon that hits like a truck and is instant. First intention has a swift Dominion build that pumps big numbers, but is one of the easiest classes to play with maybe the best mobility in the game. The SO variant needs like near perfect spec to function smoothly, so it is expensive and isn't the easiest of classes to play effectively. This once again could just be a personal thing, but it definitely has a higher skill level than the others on this list, but not in general for the game. An average player will be able to do decent damage on it assuming they understand the fundamentals of getting your crit sin and damage boost in their respective order, as your main window will be only 6 seconds. I've only recently realized that I have an adrenaline uptime problem that was kneecapping my damage. It is probably the least beginner-friendly class on this list, but is probably tied with the later class for highest potential damage if played effectively. But once again, note that the SO variant is very expensive and also relies quite a bit on wealth runes for its main meta Halu 4 build, while First Intention build is the opposite, super cheap and really only relies on Conviction Judgment runes for its alt, but not having legendary can still work for you. The Predator Slayer class seems to be an enigma of sorts. People who don't play it say it's the easiest class in the game, and people who main it says it takes skill. But both are true. Yes, it's entropy. Yes, you get significant bonus for it back attacking. Yes, constant uptime is great for staying in stance, but its damage floor is super high because I can throw a brutal impact and guillotine from a mile away and still do super large amounts of damage, and then they will come back off cooldown in no time for me to do that large number again. Its damage ceiling may only be attainable if you have hands, notably I don't, but its floor is super high and its raw damage, crazy mobility, and great utility in fights make it one of the best beginner classes in the game. I know I've seen people getting a slight fatigue of playing this recently, but as one of my main alts, it's still great time and relatively relaxed to do homework content on. But do keep in mind, it is an entropy class that prioritizes swiftness, and for optimal play, the need to keep throwing moves at the boss is required. It is a super cheap build. This was a hot topic on my previous class video, but was proven to be the case in my class building video. So if you're leaning this way, try it out and have a good time. This may have been the biggest surprise for me. I had not planned to roll a Souleater. Then, I watched a St. Tone guide for the crit build and my intrigue skyrocketed. I built it and my goodness, this has to be the most enjoyable class to play in the game. You build, you dish, and when you dish, it is an insane amount of damage. I don't have experience with a spec build, but out of the two, it is to my understanding, it is the significantly easier build to play with relatively the same amount of damage. But no, it's a spec class, so it will be relatively more expensive to build. I do highly recommend trying this class out if you have not with this upcoming express event. Maybe opt in for a spec one first to try it out, as getting the access to crit of decent qual will be easier and cheaper than the spec alternative. It is the second newest class as of the upcoming release, and it feels fresh and fun to play, and I have yet to find someone not enthralled by one of its playstyles. It is being deemed by many in the community to be broken damage wise, and after playing it for a few months, I have to agree. Any lobby with a Souleater I've played with that is bare bones in regards to your build will still be able to contend with the bigger folks in the party. It is similar to Pred Slayer in that regard, but I think it hits bigger peaks with its damage that it allows its attainable ceiling to be just higher on average. I once again highly recommend this class if you're at all interested in it. Striker is one of those classes that recently got somewhat of a buff, but mainly because it is essentially paired with Wardancer based on their shared skills. It is a back attacker, builds orbs, and then dish, but it is slow. My gripes with this class is that I already have this in SO Wardancer, but I'm not restricted to only back attack. I also have more swiftness, so feels less sluggish, and its LTS equivalent, Azure Blue Dragon, is fast, hits harder, and feels better in general. I'm currently trying to figure out my last character for my main 6, and it's a serious contender. In regards of ease of play and cost of play, it is not the easiest to build and play out the gate. Having below the spec breakpoint, which is very high quality, the third esoteric damage skill is not fluid, as you will have to hit at least one auto attack to be full orbs. To negate this, you will need almost perfect quality spec meta accessories, so keep that in mind. Esoteric Flurry is quite fun. I do have that build for it, but I initially made this class for Death Blow, and with the recent buffs, it is more fun to play. Just keep in mind this character will take more experience and gold to be clean with in your runs, as well as access to higher tier wealth runes from horizontal. But if that's what you enjoy, I definitely recommend. Note that Esoteric Flurry is a little bit of a cheaper side and can get away with less horizontal. Also note, with its slight revamp, its synergy is up all the time, and you'll be less gatekept than before, as you'll be a real crit synergy now. Arrow remains one of the most fun classes to play in the game. All my points from the previous video remains the same with Arrow. High floor, super quick, ideal synergies for party comps, and is relatively new, so its animations of feel are super refined and great to use. Its Hitmaster playstyle is great for newer players and can be great for prog with all the group buffs it brings. It's also relatively cheap with its meta build being primarily swift. I seem to be the only person in the game to not do big damage with the class, but from everything I've seen from raids, it seems its damage standing is decent amongst the others in average groups. If you want to see its peak and are around later in the day, NA times at least, check out a St. Tone stream to see the raw output it can do. Destroyer is one of those classes where it's either the most fun to play or the opposite based on the content you're playing with it on. It's another one that is strong contender for my main 6, and it was initially. The issue lies where it's currently parked. I am doing Hanamatan as a Guardian raid and Kyangle as one of my weekly raids with it. Two fights that are horrendous for front attackers and just has made me resent playing it at the moment. The issue is, if I push it, I hear a con is also dreadful. The class has gotten a slight buff in its cooldowns and charge times, which makes the class feel so much more fluid to play in the front. Hitting a 200 million perfect swing as a 1550 character on Brel is a feeling I've yet to replicate in the game. The class has huge utility, and for tauntable content is great for that. Additionally, its access to super armor makes it feel like a giant walking tank that, if played correctly, can output godly amounts of damage. If you're interested, I've stumbled across John Pal on Twitch, and the man makes the class look so fluid and fun to play, especially since he plays with a swiftness accessory to aid in movement and charging. Paladin without a doubt is the easiest support to play. I went over this in the previous video, but it remains the same, and it actually got easier. With the Thamine balance patch, Paladin can ult, and that doesn't even need to hit anymore to gain gauge. Additionally, you can ult while doing its blessed aura and re-top off your meter. Its buffs have range, and its playstyle is super simple, only rotating in Conviction and Judgment for your ult to make sure you get it back ASAP. Supports have huge desirability in game, and is probably the best way for a new player to learn and get access to these raids. I personally don't love playing support, but it's still the best and fastest way to bypass gatekeeping, besides that one tip that I made in that previous video. Scouter is probably my least played class. I used it for Jumpstart and was blown away by how fun AT was. But like most of us who tried Jumpstart, I left that after a few weeks. Now, after the merges, I have another one in my main roster, and I'm seeing how fun this class can be again. I play the 332 Halu build, and I'm having a blast on 1500 eye level content. Great stagger, great damage. If you have back attack, you can have some extra damage, but it's still unnecessary. I think it lies in between an easy playstyle and a slightly harder one, as positioning is necessary as well as small adaptability for the drone placement. Though it does great damage, you won't really see it until the MVP screen pops up, as it is a multi-hit class, so many numbers adding together for one big sum. Another pro, super cheap to build. I know this has been very rapid fire, but I think an honest quick review of my roster will help someone out there looking to lock onto a class before the express rollout in a few days. Let me know which class you intend to build up, especially if it isn't Breaker, and let me know where you're leaning, and let me know why you're leaning that way. If you have any further questions about the classes, let me know down below. I will answer any and all in a fast manner. Additionally, I will link the Nexus, which has excellent guides for every class in the game if you're looking for more in-depth info about builds, rotations, and playstyles. Check out my previous video on the most unused material vendor in Lost Ark, and check out my Lost Ark playlist for a vast amount of guides for new and returning players. I'll see you on the next video about easy ways to make gold for you with this upcoming patch. See you then.